Dear students, in this session we are studying about how we develop preferences for certain tastes and foods. As we all know, we do not like all the tastes equally and we do not like to have all the types of foods with equal preference. We prefer to have certain tastes and foods over the others. This taste preference begins during the fetal life and continues across the lifetime. The development of taste preferences is based on several biological and environmental factors that influence food intake. Newborn infants are hardwired to prefer the tastes that signal beneficial nutrients. For example, sweet taste signals calories and hence infants prefer to have sweet food. On the other hand, they reject bitter tastes because bitter tastes generally signal harmful compounds. Even though the newborn infants are hardwired with respect to taste preferences, infants and young children show considerable plasticity in taste preference. They show great adaptability in taste and food preferences. It is because of this adaptability that children are able to accept and learn to prefer foods available in the culture. You know that food culture is different in different regions of the world and people learn to prefer these foods in their childhood stage itself because of the adaptability of taste preference. Development of taste preference involved the interaction of gustatory and olfactory systems. During the early stages of life, when these systems develop, perception of tastings and flavor molecules seem to play the primary role. While in the womb of the mother, the baby ingests some amniotic fluid which contains amino acids and proteins. Interaction with these molecules help in the development of gustatory and olfactory systems. The formation of fungiform, foliate and circumvallate papillae takes place in the first trimester during the 10th week of gestation. The innervation of taste cells by gustatory neurons, that is taste cell synaptogenesis, takes place from 8 to 13 weeks of gestation. During the second trimester, the taste papillae become functionally mature and by the end of third trimester, the number as well as the distribution of taste papillae become similar to that of an adult person. By the time the child is born, the morphological and functional development of gustatory system is complete. What happens after birth is the maturity of neural systems that are concerned with sensory perception of taste in the brain. The food preferences of a person are influenced by biological factors and social factors. When we consider biological factors, we can see that there are genes which influence taste perception and preference. The perception for sweet, umami and bitter tastes is not the same for all the individuals. There are genetic differences. You know that G protein coupled receptors are involved in the perception of these tastes. These G protein coupled receptors are encoded by genes. We have studied about the mechanism of taste perception with GPCR or G protein coupled receptors in detail in the previous classes. There can be genetic differences between individuals in the GPCR that they have for taste perception. Based on that, the taste preferences will also be different. An example of genetic influence on taste perception and preference is the sensitivity to the bitter compound phenylthiocarbamide, which is in short called PTC. PTC perception is due to T2R38 receptor encoded by a gene. Human beings are diploid and for every gene we have two alleles, one we get from the father and the other from the mother. So the child has two alleles for every gene. These alleles for a particular gene can be of the same type or different. One can be dominant and the other recessive, or both the alleles can be dominant or both can be recessive. The allele for PTC taste perception is denoted by the letter T. Capital T is dominant and denotes the ability for PTC taste perception, and small t is recessive and denotes the insensitivity to PTC. Individuals who have dominant allele capital T will have T2R38 receptors on all the taste receptor cells in tongue, and all of them will bind PTC. Such individuals will have a strong perception of PTC taste. Individuals who are double recessive do not have T2R38 receptor on the tongue receptor cells, and hence PTC will not bind to the taste receptor cells. Such individuals are insensitive to PTC, and even if they try to taste it, it is tasteless for them. Some individuals will be having one dominant allele and one recessive allele. Some of the tongue receptor cells will be having the T2R38 receptor which can bind PTC. Hence, such individuals will taste PTC as moderately bitter. Individuals with bitter sensitive alleles for T2R38 gene will rate bitter foods as more bitter because they have T2R38 receptor on the tongue receptor cells. On the other hand, individuals with bitter insensitive alleles of T2R38 gene, they rate bitter foods as tasteless since they don't have T2R38 receptors on the taste receptor cells. The genetic sensitivity to bitter taste can influence the preference for other tastes. Individuals more sensitive to bitterness have a heightened perception of sweet taste, and they prefer to have sweet food. The conditions to which the child is exposed while in the womb of the mother can influence the taste preference of the child. The fetus inhales and swallows significant amount of amniotic fluid by late gestation. Amniotic fluid contains many nutrients like glucose and amino acids and other tastings and flavors of the mother's dietary and environmental exposures. After birth, the child feeds on the breast milk of the mother, which also contains tastings from the mother's dietary and environmental exposures. All these experiences can influence the taste preference of the child. Here you can see the characteristic responses of a newborn child to sweet and bitter tastes. See the differences. How did the child learn about these responses? It is all based on the experiences that the child had while in the womb of the mother. After the breastfeeding period, when the children are introduced with new foods, they are mostly unwilling to eat new foods. This is called food neophobia. Food neophobia is especially high in the children from 2 to 5 years. We have to compel them so much to make them eat food. They may not feel the taste of the food appealing. This distaste is the strongest driver of neophobia. During childhood, children usually prefer to have food which are familiar to them and those which are sweet in taste. Now moving on to the social influences on food preferences. The prenatal and postnatal periods are the most sensitive period for learning food preference. The experiences that the child gets while in the uterus influence the taste preference of the child in later life. During the early sensitive period of taste preference, the child shows hedonic based preference, that is, eating food based on motivation or reward. The color, smell, and texture of food attracts children. They prefer to have food which are appealing to their eyes, or else they eat food to get a reward when they are compelled. This is called hedonic based preference. The food neophobia can be reduced and food preference can be increased by repeatedly exposing children to novel foods. When they become familiar with the food culture in their family, they will learn to prefer that food. When children are given novel foods in a positive social environment, they will be more willing to have those foods by observing others also having such foods. Positive ingestive consequences or having a good feel after having food can help children to accept the food. Parental feeding practices greatly influence food preference of children. Offering contingencies or rewards may have an immediate effect in making the child eat the food, but later in life, the child may not prefer to have such foods. Parents usually restrict children from having sweet and energy rich foods like candies, ice creams, etc. But this restriction increases the child's preference to have such energy rich snack foods. When a person becomes an adult, there occurs a transition from hedonic food preference to homeostatic food preference. In the childhood stage, the child prefers to have food for pleasure or reward, and in the adulthood, the person eats to meet the energy demand of the body based on physical activities. When a person becomes an adult, the food preferences are greatly associated with age, sex, health status, education, income, impacts of food in later life, and so on. During old age, there is a decline in the normal taste, which is called hypogeusia, and the decline in taste sensitivity or distortion of normal taste occurs during old age. It is called dysgeusia. These conditions can be due to reduction in the number of taste buds or due to certain diseases like Alzheimer's disease, medications, or surgical interventions. With that, we finish the module Gustatory Perception. Thank you.